welcome to the ED show. We've got another special guest this evening. Daryl's going to introduce her, so take it away.
Yeah, basically, I've been following this great lady for some time. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady, beautiful spirit, beautiful soul, and she does some fantastic work in the art world. And I just brought her on because I feel that we don't celebrate creativity enough all around the world, all around the UK. We just need creative souls. And I think that Fiona is probably one of the best ambassadors to help inspire people to become creative again. So if you could, Fiona, if you could tell our audience just a little bit about you and what you do and how people can reach out to you and what you actually do yourself.
Okay, well, you're giving me a very big head with that introduction. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'm an artist. I work mostly doing painting. And at the moment, I'm working with watercolors. I do oils and things. And I kind of hook onto a theme, and I follow that for a while. You can follow me on my Instagram, Foyer Designs, and my website, FionaFoyer.com.
Those
Yeah,
all
as I said, I think creativity is really important. It's not just art or painting or what we consider classical ideas of creativity, because we do it in everyday things. But I do think it is an important thing to feed our souls with.
Fiona's website and things will be linked in the description, by the way, guys. Just interjecting that at this point, if you're interested.
So who inspired you then, Fiona, to get sort of doing? Is this a childhood thing, or is this something that you just fell into?
No, it's actually it's a family thing.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's not until very recently that I kind of started looking at kind of holistically through our family. So my mother's always been very creative. So when we were little, we'd be like, she would draw us a picture so we could color it, and then she'd be like, "What do you want? Do you want a fairy or do you want a princess?" And you go, "I want a fairy princess." So she would draw a little fairy princess. Did she have long hair, short hair, long dress, short dress, big wings, little wings? And she would draw these for us, and we draw. And we there's always things to do. And then recently, a friend sent me a link for a show that's going on in Bristol, which is where I'm based, and it was kind of, I got in touch with them to see if it was some a way for me to show my work, and they're saying, "Oh no, we only show older work." So I said, "Oh, I've got 2 paintings of my great uncle," and they're like, "Well, we only show work we're going to sell." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to sell my great uncle's work." So I was thinking, well, actually, it'd be quite interesting maybe to do a show with mine and his work. He's from around Sutherland, just pictures from Sutherland, Newcastle. Then I started thinking about it. My sister's an artist. She does a lot of sculpture and drawings and stuff at the moment, and does a lot of interactive media with storytelling. And obviously my mother. And then on my dad's side, we've got another great uncle who was an amazing painter. And then great grandfather was the conductor of the Edinburgh Royal Choral Union. So there's a lot of creativity in our family. The other half are engineers. Not sure how this balances out in me, but so it is quite just been brought up with creativity. And Mom used to always make sure we had beautiful books. We always had really nice pictures and in the house. So yeah, it's kind of ingrained in my DNA.
Do you think that encourages people then to have a creative flow and a creative balance? Do you find within your work that, because I know you're in contact with other artists and different things like that, do you find that perhaps the young artists are sort of coming through and people that want to get in touch with their creative flair, do you find that, because I believe in left brain, right brain, And I think the creative side of the brain is the right brain. And my whole angle from this is to encourage people out there to get their creative side and not be locked into the left side of the brain, which is limitation, rather than somebody like you that can create something out of nothing, you know, which is and like Elliot is pretty gifted in that as well.
I think there's two things there. One is there is the fear. There's the fear of making a mistake. And I think not everything I make is good. Trust me. It is not. There's a lot of stuff behind me that's just absolute shit. You know, and it's like, what the hell have I done here? But that's part of the process. You need to get rid of the fear that actually artists make everything they put their hand to is going to be amazing. It's not. A lot of it is just, you know, playing around. You doodle a bit. As I said, I've been working with watercolors, but my watercolors are very, very tight. They're very, very, very precise. And I don't use it in the traditional way that people use watercolors. And I took a watercolor class from an artist, and I'm like, I want to learn to be messy. And she's like, get a big brush. I'm like, so I got a big brush. That lasted about 3 minutes, and I was down to my little tiny brushes again. And, you know, we need to learn to make a mess, make mistakes. It's okay, you know, because it's the process of doing it that's really good for the soul. And the other part is actually, how do I make my mark? Well, actually, I have trained my hand and my eyes, my body to make this mark. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours doing this mark over and over and over again. So, oh, I wish I could draw like you. Oh, I wish I could do this. Really? Well, get yourself a bloody pen and paper and start practicing, because I've spent my life doing this.
I think that's the thing that most people don't realize, is that it's not something that comes immediately. You know, it's a process. And things like you see on Instagram and things like this, you see everybody's got these immaculate art pages, and what they don't realize is that that's like the 5% of stuff that you decide is good enough to actually put online, you know, to show other people. The other 95% of stuff is stuff that you get annoyed at and throw in a bin. But you know, that's the artistic sort of cycle, is being angry all the time at how inept you are, but then occasionally getting something good and then going, see, look, I'm good at what I do, you know. But with me, like, I started off because I grew up very, very poor, and I didn't have a lot of toys. So what I would do is I would buy some, it's called Fimo or Fimo, wherever you want to pronounce it. It's like colored clay that you can put in the oven and cook. And I would make my own Wallace and Gromit figurines and whatever popped into my head. And I would make countless toys out of, you know, £5 worth of material. And, you know, I'd have like a whole army of rabbits or whatever I could think of. Aliens, anything. And then I'd be like, well, there you go, I've got my thing. And it just sort of spiraled from there. And I just kept doing it for whatever reason. And that's kind of the artistic process, being obsessive and weird.
Yes. And I think, like, I remember at Christmas time, for example, I was the oldest, firstborn in my family, so there was for a while I was the only child. And Christmas time, all the adults would be talking, and I would be, back then, you get your Christmas paper on those long cardboard tubes, and I would take the cardboard tubes and I would take all the ripped up Christmas paper and I'd make dolls. You know, and I had they were my Christmas family dolls, and I would play with them until they fell apart, you know. But yeah, it is, I mean, as a child, you're free to put your hands in things and make a mess. Go do some finger painting, go do this. And when does that stop? I don't know. And I think that's kind of sad. And I think as adults, especially like at the moment with everybody kind of having a limitation put on their life externally, it's not by choice. It's very difficult. So I think creativity is a great way of kind of giving that freedom to yourself. Go get yourself, it doesn't have to be painting. It doesn't have to be sculpture. It could be cooking. It could be, um, doing your podcast. It could be in writing. It could be, there's so many different ways that we're creative. Um, and it is a process. It is very much a process. I've had interesting discussion with a fellow artist, and we were talking about the process of art. And I was saying, well, all the sciences have come from the arts,
Mm.
and they're like, really? I said, well, yeah. Why do they call it a theater when you go for surgery?
Mm.
And the scientific method is actually the exact same method as the artistic method. I want to make this. This is my hypothesis. Okay, this is how I'm going to try and do it. And as you go along, you adjust it, you whatever. And then at the end, you have your conclusion. And you go, yeah, that worked. No, that didn't. And it's the exact same process. And, but we think it's kind of this mysterious thing of, oh, it's just like, it must be a gift from God. Well, actually, no, it's fucking hard work,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean you can't have fun getting there. And doing it as a profession and doing it for entertaining yourself, there isn't much difference except that actually you need a product at the end to sell. If you do it professionally. But the process, you do need to just kind of keep at it, really.
So do you think that if schools sort of, because I know they do art within the curriculum, but I don't think they allow, in my opinion, I feel the educational system dumbs down children as opposed to get children where they need to be. And in my opinion, I think the creative side could be better, and it could do more for well-being and health. I was just wondering what your take on that would be. Do you feel much better doing your work as opposed to not doing your work? I know where you're concerned, you feel it's a calling probably, but by the same token, I think it would alleviate a lot of stresses and depressions if people could do their creative flair.
Yes, I agree with that. I didn't do my schooling here. I grew up in Canada, so the education system I grew up in was quite different. I was extremely lucky in that my family helped me, and I was doing classes in ceramics because I started more doing ceramics and sculpture and stuff, more so than painting when I was younger. So I was doing that after school, from the age of like 10. you know I did art clubs and stuff on the weekend, um and then I had really, really good teachers from the age of 12 to when I finished school, which is 18, grade 12. I had exceptional teachers in my high school. We had two teachers, Mr. and Mrs. H. They weren't married, but they just happened to have the same initial for the last name. And actually, my high school, we had better equipment, more variety of equipment than I did when I did my university here in London.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was exceptional. And so I was very lucky in that. Now my family was very supportive. And so I was lucky in that sense. Now, a few years ago, I had sepsis, and very, very bad. And I had nerve damage to my hands. I couldn't even write my name. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't text. I couldn't do anything. And I went to the doctor, because this is, I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't write my name. And they were just like, I'm really sorry, there's nothing we can do. And it was horrible to have that ability taken away, because I have spent my lifetime working on this. And so I spent a long time working and doing various things, and been able to get my hands back. I mean, I still have a little bit of issues, and they do sometimes shake and sometimes hurt, but I could paint and draw again. And it's horrible to have that inability to do that. It's not as I said, I'd worked so hard to be able to do what I want to do, and then I couldn't, because a lot of my work is about smooth lines and thin lines, and I couldn't do that because my hands were so shaking. And then, I remember, and I like baking and stuff. So at Christmas, I always make some sort of gingerbread extravaganza. So I was trying to make gingerbread and put the bits together. The more I did it, the more my hands shook, and the gingerbread was flying everywhere. It was just ridiculous. So it's I can understand not being able to, whether it's physically or you don't have the space, or you don't, like like you said, Elliot, you don't have um, the materials, but it's in us, and we should create, even if it is a mess. It's important. It's important to feed our soul that way. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be um, precise. It doesn't have to be something that's going to hang in a gallery or your living room. It's about the fun of it.
That's what I want to try and convey, because I want people to, rather than people get hooked up in this sort of left brain sort of dystopian reality where you're sort of looking at, left brain thinking, I'm going to be, I'm measured by this, I'm measured by how much money I make, I'm measured by that. Just be. And that's
Yeah.
what I want to try and convey to people. Rather than being unhappy with what you are, just nurture what you got, create what you've got, love, and just be happy and live a fruitful life. And don't sort of get locked into the left brain system where you're trapped almost into not being what you want to be, and just be, rather than the labels. I'm a manager of this, I earn this. It's just it's crap. In my opinion, it's just it's a shite, which is the sort of leftist sort of political class sort of agenda to sort of get us in. I'd rather have people like you and Elliot that can just go out and, doesn't matter if it's a mess. You've enjoyed doing it and you've created, and do you know something? It's something that you can be passionate about. And I think that's the difference. Having a passion, having something to feel alive, getting your hands dirty, getting your hands on something, and not sitting in the house texting or being trapped in worry about bills and mortgages and all that shit.
So
Yeah.
what I think would be a good idea now is if we, in the next couple of minutes, have a look at your website, and maybe you can discuss some of your pieces and what you've been getting into, and what you personally are interested in your art journey. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure, great. Where would you like
Okay.
to start? So as I said, the one that I'm working on, the series I'm working on at the moment, is the hair fetish.
So
And
if we look into that, we can see.
yeah.
So this is your website here.
Yeah.
Can you see it at all, or?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're scrolling down.
Yeah. So I discovered, I mean, hair fetish is just a massive topic that I could talk for hours on, but and I find it fascinating, and this kind of inspired me to do this series around painting around hair fetish. Now, if you go down a little bit and you see the lady, oops,
Yeah,
sorry, no,
sorry.
that's okay.
I just got.
Yeah. There's if you go, sorry, scroll down, and you see them. If you click on the redheaded ladies, yeah, one of them, yeah, either of them is fine. So these paintings I did after I had my sepsis. So this is, you'll notice they're not as precise as later on were, but these are photographs of what's the term is called a bunny. So you have the hair fetishist, and then they have their bunny, like the bunnies you experiment on. So this particular fetishist, he's in Netherlands, and he allows me to use his pictures, and this is his bunny. And she's got this gorgeous red hair, and if you see his pictures there, it's just this incredible array around hair fetish. And I just thought it would be about brushing hair, plaiting hair, things like that. But it's massive. There's like a whole subsection of just salon capes. It's just like, and most of the people in these kind of hair fetish groups that I've joined and gone into and stuff, most of them are men. And I think the reason behind that is because for women, it's perfectly normal for me to say, oh, I love going to the salon. I love having my hair brushed. Oh, you know, it's very acceptable socially. Whereas for men, it's not so much. So what word can you use to describe this joy that you get? And so the men have found this word fetish. And I just think it's an interesting topic. And I do love hair and stuff. So um, it's just been a very interesting kind of process of learning around this this world around hair fetish. So this is what this series is. I did a show not long ago at a club here in Bristol called Dare. It's an adult club, so they have fetish nights. They have well, they have swingers and stuff. They do a variety of other things, but um, so I had my show there of the art of the hair fetish series, and it was really good fun. It was very interesting. Hair is just so common.
Mm.
Yeah, it's
Except for where Daryl's concerned, obviously.
no, but even so, there's a whole thing around shaving heads and bald heads, and
there you go,
and
Daryl. You found your community.
there's yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway, so I've been working on this series, and yeah, I've it's just seems to be never ending. And then it goes in, and then you see them crossing over with other things. Like in this case, you can see the bunny's got the collar on and stuff, and so it combines with bondage and other things. Um, but it's yeah, I find it just really quite fascinating.
Could I ask you, at this point, do you find there's a big market to sort of tap into with the fetishes of art? Do you find that they coincide and people are really
Well,
interested in appreciating the art?
well, it was interesting showing it at that club. There was quite a few people who came who have never been to that type of club before. And of course, because this was just October, so obviously things were limited in what people could and couldn't do. So because of COVID. So it was quite an interesting and safe space for people who had never been into a club like that to come in, ask questions, what happens here, etc. And also then look at the work, and maybe they've never heard of hair fetish before or stuff like that. So I don't know. Hopefully, a lot of people have said, "Oh, I should go to hairdressers and see if they want to." Um, you know, to put it on their walls, because there's most of them are you could like this is um you could have that on your wall anywhere. No one would think twice about it. And I suppose that's the other thing around hair fetish is it's if you came up and touched my hair in public, no one would think twice about that. If they knew that was your fetish, then there's something different. There's a whole nother layer to what
Absolutely.
that means. Yeah. Um,
It's definitely.
the one with the purple hair. Now that is from Hair Down a Bit.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. The man I got that from, he's a hair fetishist in the States, and he had a series of just where he's taken his mobile phone and just kind of walked along and snapped pictures of women's hair, just out and about. Now, again, you wouldn't think anything of it, and you see they're terrible photographs, absolutely terrible, they're kind of blurred and what have you. But then you realize that actually he's doing this for a sexual reason. Then they almost become sinister. Anyway, so this was a friend of his that he took this picture of her. And so, he said I could do this picture. But yeah, it was very interesting seeing these kind of secret photos of hair. Yeah.
It's a sort of hidden world, which is kind of where we like to go in our podcast generally. Yeah. We like to sort of look under the rocks, see what there is living there.
But if I'll give you this advice to you two boys, you ever have you meet someone new, if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and you offer to brush their hair, they're gonna love it. Absolutely love it. Whether people call it a fetish themselves, most people love having their head played with. An Indian head massage, going to the salon, having your hair washed. People love that kind of. It's a strange kind of mixture of innocence and intimacy.
I often stroke the back of Daryl's head.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Usually when I have it cut, and he does it to weird people out because that's his thing.
Well, no, I do it because I like when you've just had your hair cut, it's nice. It's nice and sort of
soft and prickly at the same
prickly,
time.
Yeah. It's a strange, so I just go up and invade his personal space and stroke the back of his head.
Yeah,
I go, you've had a haircut, and then I just, I feel it. It's part of monkey brain that I like to let out every now and then. It's the thing within me that wants to just pick him for insects.
Yeah.
Now I got insects in my head, right?
Yeah.
You dirty boy. But like, for example, you take that interaction between the two of you. Now you guys are friends, and he's got his haircut. You like the sensation of it. Okay, you change it, even if no one knows the difference. And let's say you two are partners, and you do this.
She's rumbled us.
It's a different. It means something different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, well, actually, you add the layer on to actually, this is a fetish. This is something that actually arouses you. It becomes another level to it. And even though it's the exact same act, which you can do in public, and no one would bat an eye to. It becomes
I don't know. I think in most parts of Wales, if you had a young lad stroking a middle-aged man's head, they'd get their head kicked in some parts of Wales, even now.
So I suppose what you're interested in is context, in a way. Is that the sort of
that, and the beauty of it as well? It's and sensuality. There's something quite the sex of it. It may not be actual intercourse, but there is this whole thing, like, as I said, there's this whole subsection where there's these men that absolutely are passionate about salon capes. And there's a hair fetish group on Facebook I'm part of. And there's a little video. It's about 15 seconds long of one of the gentlemen sitting in his salon chair. He's wearing every single one of his capes, which is about like 16 of them. And he just turns very slowly in that chair. It is the most watched video on that page.
Wow.
Yeah. And most of them are men on that page.
Very interesting.
And it is.
See, I wasn't aware that this was a thing at all.
No. And neither did I until like years ago. I used to work for a swingers club down in Weston. I used to do their websites and graphics and things. And I just said, oh, I like having my hair brushed. Oh, hair fetish. So of course I had to go on and Google and, and,
Mm.
and you know, in this whole other world of stuff. And yeah, I thought I was a woman of the world, but that place definitely opened my eyes to a few things I had no idea about. But yeah, it's very interesting. I do find it very fascinating,
Mm.
you know. And you've got the with hair, with cultures, with religion, especially. It's such a prominent way for controlling women around the world. And it's part of your identity, your sexuality. It's hair is just really quite a fascinating subject.
Mm.
Um, yes,
There you
and
go.
I really enjoy doing it. And like these are all watercolors. So this is what I was saying before about mine's quite precise.
Yes, yeah, you wouldn't even necessarily know that it was
Yeah,
watercolor, would you?
yeah, it's yeah.
It's very cool.
Thank you.
Have you always been into watercolor, or is this fairly new?
No, it's something. Well, I've kind of played around with it, but I've always kind of mostly worked in oils. But because of where I've lived, and then because I've had been, as I said, I had sepsis and stuff. I've had quite a few illnesses over the last few years, so um, I couldn't really paint in oils
Mm.
because you need proper ventilation and you need a space where you can leave the painting
Yeah,
dry because it takes sometimes months for it to dry. Um, Whereas watercolors, you can do it and then it's dry. You
yeah. Mm.
know, it doesn't take long for it to dry, and I can work with that. Uh, and it's yeah, so it's a nice medium. I mean, it's very different than oils. Oils, you get this nice creaminess and lusciousness to it that I like. And I like working on canvas with oils, and it's quite different with paper. You don't have the movement of the canvas when you're working.
Mm.
And stuff. But yeah, for me at the moment, it's kind of uh, I can't really work on oils at the moment because of logistics.
Mm.
So
Have you thought of possibly working in glass or wax? Because I think this sort of thing would translate brilliantly.
um, yes, I've done glass painting before.
Mm.
Um, and I have, if you go back to the portfolio page, go into the Cubist portraits, which is some of my older work. Um, so, like the top one is that's my very first Cubist portrait I ever did. I did that when I was 17,
Mm.
and this is when I fell in love with Cubism. And a lot of people said, "Oh, it's very much like stained glass." Now,
Mm.
I've never done stained glass. And now, because of what happened with my sepsis, I don't think I could do stained glass. I don't have the strength in my hands to do things like that. But I can imagine, like I use her as my logo. She's a self-portrait I did back then,
Oh, okay.
and um, I would love to see her as stained glass. I think she'd look beautiful,
Mm.
and I think it would lend very well.
Mm.
But I haven't worked in it, and it's not something I could work in now.
I suppose we all have sort of things that we'd love to work with, but for whatever
Well,
reason, it's a bit beyond our means sometimes, isn't it?
yeah. Most of the time, it's financially.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Being creative is not cheap.
No.
Uh,
I don't know if you wanted to move on to maybe one of your favorite artists that you are inspired by, or we could move on to my work, or whatever you would
oh,
prefer to.
either or is fine. Um, I mean, I obviously I like Picasso and stuff, and Kandinsky. I think it's quite fascinating. Um, and Emily Carr as well. I really, really like Emily Carr. I
Let's
think
have
that's
a
also
Emily Carr.
Carr. Now she's
Oh, okay.
fascinating.
Wow,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
you know,
see the.
I love that.
I
yeah,
can see sort of.
she was quite amazing. So she would go down the river. So she's a Canadian artist.
Mm.
And she used to go with the fur trappers in their canoes, and she'd be like sketching in the canoes as they're like whipping down these rivers in white water and stuff, which was unheard of to do anyways, never mind as a woman.
Mm.
But yeah, I like her use of colors. I like the use of her movement. Um, you know, it's especially if you've been to, especially Western Canada, which is most of her works around Western Canada. You can really see she really captures that beauty of that part of the world.
So
It's phenomenal.
is this all
Yeah, like
her as well then? Things like this.
yeah, if you go to the one next to that one,
This one here.
yeah, so you've got um here we go. So this is very West Coast in Canada. So you've got the carving, but like also the movement of these greens and these blues and stuff. It's very misty, and the weather's very similar to that of us here.
Mm.
It doesn't really snow or anything, but it's also um, uh, British Columbia, that part of British Columbia on the coast, west coast, and stuff is rainforest. And most people don't realize Canada has the only temporal rainforest in the world. So you've got these massive trees and this lusciousness, and I think she does a beautiful job of capturing that.
Mm.
Um,
It's got a very strong mood to it.
yeah,
I don't know if would it be post-expressionist or
I don't know.
I
I'm
don't
not
know.
very. Does things have to have a label?
No, I suppose not. I'm feeling some Cezanne. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of Cezanne coming from this. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
One of my favorite artists of all time is a man
Mhm.
named Beksinski. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No,
Um,
I'm not terribly great with names, so I might have seen his work.
well, it's rather a difficult. Zadislav Beksinski. An amazing guy.
He's
Grew
got a
up.
bit of a backstory, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, he grew up through the. He's a Polish painter, born in 1929, as I can see on Wikipedia, and he grew up through the war. So he saw all the death camps, and he saw the Jews and all that sort of thing happen when he was a small child, and through to being a teenager. And so his art is quite interesting, shall we say. It tends to take these forms of sort of organic shapes, things that are quite strange and nightmarish.
But beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, he had a massive influence on 70s metal album covers and things like that.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think he even designed a few for like Iron Maiden or one of them. But often he had these emaciated forms in his paintings because obviously he saw a lot of people that were starving to death in the camps and stuff like that. So this is all sort of from his own experience. And he used, this is quite a difficult thing to think about, but I think it's very clever of him. Oh gosh, Etsy, no, Pinterest. What were we talking about? Let me see the painting.
You're
Here
saying
we
what
go.
he was using.
Yeah, so he was using in his paintings, a lot of the time he'd use compound called Prussian blue, which
Yes.
you're probably familiar with. So like this is Prussian blue. A lot of his paintings involved the use of blue, and often blue would be used to represent death. And this was because, this is quite an interesting element of his work. Basically, when the gas chambers were in use, the Zyklon B gas would interact with rust and things like that on the side of the walls and form the same compound that is Prussian blue, and it would stain the walls and the bodies of the victims this bright blue color. So he would see that when they opened them up, obviously after the war, he saw all the blue staining inside the gas chambers, and so he associated that with the regime of death that the Nazis had in his country. Make of that what you will, but I think using that sort of the same compound that was produced in such a difficult context in his work is something that's quite I don't know, commendable, or just is very honest, I suppose.
And also educational. Like I had no idea about that.
Yeah, it's a type of cyanide, isn't it? Or
There's such a thing called DNB, which in the weightlifting community, they use it for as a fat burner, shall we say, as a cutting agent. But it was also used in the concentration camps for the Jews to keep the bodies warm. And that lets off a dye, which is a yellow dye, which is quite interesting there. As you said, the blue dye he associates with death.
yeah, I mean, I think it's good that he shows all these sort of strange images, things like this, which obviously these are a lot of these are nightmarescapes. He never named a single one of his paintings. He did, I think, hundreds of them. Never named a single one. He didn't want any names to influence how people thought of them. He just wanted them to be there and speak for themselves, I suppose. And he died in quite an interesting way. He had an argument with one of his neighbours who wanted some, I think the equivalent of like £100 off of him, and obviously he didn't give his neighbour that money, and he stabbed him to death 15 times, thus ending Bekshinsky. But you know, interesting man, interesting life, and amazing art. He's my favorite artist of all time.
Yeah, I mean, this is what art can do. Art, like I'm looking at these and I'm absolutely moved by those images.
I
I've
think
now heard about Passion Blue and about, you know, how
even without the context, you can tell that there's something going on in his head.
something very intense.
Yeah.
And yeah, my great grandfather, as I said, he was the conductor of the Edinburgh Royal Choral Union. And when he became the conductor, there was all this wonderful stuff in the newspaper about how dare they give this prestigious job to a foreigner. He had been living in Scotland for like, God knows, 20 odd years, married a Scottish lady, 3 kids. He was originally from Germany. And then the World War I broke out, and he was interned because he never took out British citizenship, even though he had lived there for most of his adult life. And my great uncle, so his son, one of his sons, who's really quite amazing artist, did this little sketch of I saw. I was like, oh, that's just a little room with a chair and some bookshelves and a little table and stuff. And it turned out to be actually where his father was interred. And then you look closely at it, and all around the edge, he had drawn barbed wire around the edge of the picture. That picture suddenly becomes something completely different when you know the context.
Mm.
And this is what I think what's just fabulous about art is that you can take a picture, and like, even if you hadn't told me anything about him, looking at
Mm.
that one, for example, these two bodies entwined in absolute love, care, protection, and they're obviously dead, or if not close to it.
Mm.
Um, it's incredibly powerful. And then you hear about and you learn a bit about the history, you learn a bit about chemistry, you learn a bit about. This is why we put pictures on our walls.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that he did was he sort of solidified what the experience was like, because you can see pictures of the death camps and stuff, and yes, it's shocking, but it doesn't really necessarily key in. You can hear
Yeah.
6 million or numbers upon numbers, and it doesn't do anything because large numbers don't really affect the
Yeah.
human brain particularly well. But when it's something that you can quantify in a more sort of basic human feeling way, then it's often a lot more impactful. And I think that's important. If you want to show an event from history, do it in the most honest way possible, and this is him being very honest, which is why I like him.
And difficult. It's a difficult thing to look at.
Mm.
It really challenges the viewer to go, this is what people did.
Mm.
This is what people did. You are people.
Mm.
That's a very.
And I think suppression of such things like this is why we don't learn from history. I think in recent events where they've been removing statues, where they've taken away our history, I think we've done some awful things. All people have over the years, but forgetting the history, then you can't learn from it. So the future generations can be inspired by this work.
But that's also part of history.
Yeah.
History has been made by these statues being removed. What was there before that statue?
Yeah, of course.
It's not forever.
But I suppose you've just got to embrace the ever-turning wheel of repetition sometimes, don't you? But I certainly don't particularly want to see anything that would produce this sort of artwork again in a widespread. Obviously, there are conflicts and things like that going on that are horrific. There's human trafficking, all sorts going on in the world at the moment. I mean, there's like torture sports and things like that you hear about, people being kidnapped for awful things.
Absolutely.
So hopefully, by seeing art like this, by keying into why things like genocide is bad, that's an important lesson. And I think art can teach something that's emotional a lot better than a history lesson could. Obviously, art is history. They're intertwined, but I think the artistic side of things is something that a lot of people just dismiss. I don't like art, but it's important. It's very important for our culture.
I don't know if you sell your work, but it's kind of, well, how like, for example, the hair fetish pictures. The smaller ones start at like £1,600. And it's like, well, that takes me a couple of weeks to do. So why is that much? Why can't I just pay £10 for it? Well, no, people don't say there's no value in it. You shouldn't charge that much. Really? How about if I gave you a Picasso for free? How much would you be bragging about that? And it's, where is the value? Where is the importance of it? Is it the the money value, or is it something like this? Like I will never forget this image that we're looking at.
No,
You know?
yeah. I mean, I think that's whether you're interested in sort of whether you're interested in the art for the sake of emperor's clothes, you know, the way that a lot of modern art has gone, or whether you're interested in art for the sake of expression, you know, they're very different things. Like things like, not to bring up something that I'm going to rant about because we've only got a couple minutes left, but people like Anish Kapoor, who have, you know, co-opted an entire color. I don't know if you're aware of that. Vanta Black, he has exclusive rights to it, you know, that sort of thing, just purely because, you know, that's wholly and completely ego. And that's where the big money in art is at the moment, and that's terrible because it's been co-opted by a load of egotistical maniacs that aren't really saying anything. I don't know if a giant chrome bean in the middle of I just don't see the relevance of that. It doesn't say anything to me, you know. It's a big bean, you know.
Well, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes, it is, and we have to end soon. So, but
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
I think we
up,
should.
Are we going on to the last bit of the podcast? You're going to do the recording from that, and then we're done. Then,
Yeah. I'm just thinking. I think we should definitely have a second part to this, if you'd be willing to, Fiona, because I think
Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
there's a lot more to discuss, and I think, you know, we're hardly halfway into the material.
Yeah, no, yeah, art's just such a huge topic. I mean, I've been doing an online course around Instagram, and which is very interesting. And one of the questions it's about selling, which is what's your why? And of course, there's the question of why you do art, which is just like a massive question that will never be answered. And then it's kind of like, why do you do art? And it's fascinating. It's just there's so much to art, you know. Yeah, and then the business of art.
And I think these are all things that we can discuss in our next episode with you, if that would be something you want to do.
That'd be great. Yeah. That'd be great. And
right.
Do you have a page? Do you have a?
Yes, we'll get onto that at some other point. But no, yeah,
I can look at your stuff just out of curiosity.
Yes, I'll send it to you. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.